There's so much to love and so much hatred toward the Nintendo Switch 2. So to figure out whether I should love it or hate it, I decided to ask you. I put up 2 community posts, one asking what you love most about the Nintendo Switch 2, and one asking what you hate the most. And as I go through your answers, I'll tell you if I agree or disagree. Let's get started. Loser Guy Thingy hates your mom. Anything Sushi hates, the name. I feel like they could have tried harder than just, oh, it's the Switch, but now it's 2. Now, okay, listen, Anything Sushi. I think that the name isn't that bad. I'm just gonna be honest. I get why they put the Switch 2 at the end. They didn't want to confuse people. They wanted to make sure that people didn't think this was some sort of accessory for the Switch 1. I mean, it looks pretty similar, so yes. They needed to add the Switch 2 so that people didn't get confused. They pulled a good old PlayStation and just started adding numbers. It makes sense. So I disagree. I actually kind of like the name. Vermod667 says, I hate that it might not fit in my pocket. I understand this concern, especially if you're coming from a Switch Lite. My pockets are big enough today, I can almost fit an entire Switch in my pocket. Now, this is just the OG Switch. There's no way a Switch 2 is gonna fit in my pocket, but if you're used to that or if you got a Switch Lite, that would actually suck. However, I would much prefer a bigger Switch 2 than for it to fit in my pocket. So, I disagree. I'm glad that it's upgrading. RacyDuck45 says, the fact I won't have to buy 2 extra sets of Joy-Con because they start drifting after a while. And better performance, obviously. Yes, that's right. Although the Switch 2 seemingly still has contact-based mechanism, analog stick stuff, so there is a possibility of drifting. Most likely Nintendo figured out the entire drifting situation, and we won't see that anymore. Drownedwick8 says, I hate that you wouldn't own it. I would hate that too. RexDeflex21 hates. I really wish they made a new 3D Mario. That would be awesome. I don't want an overpriced race game, which you don't even go on the track, and the 9th one in the series. I totally see your point. Although we're not getting a 3D Mario game, we are at least getting a 3D Donkey Kong game, which kind of replaces the need for that. At least we are a little bit behind for 3D Mario releases, but I'm hoping that my thirst is quenched with the Donkey Kong game. So I disagree with this one. 8-Bit Blake says, I love that we finally have GameCube Online service. I also love that. Now, I think that the game selection probably could have been a little bit stronger, at least at launch. We didn't see any Melee, which is going to be a crazy one. And we also didn't see any Double Dash. I want my boy Double Dash. So yes, I do agree. I do love that we have GameCube Online service. It probably just could have added a little more heavy hitters, but those are going to be a big deal when it happens. Celestial Phoenix 3538 says, I hate how the camera will be used in Mario Party. I also hate that. I agree with this one. I played this during the experience in Toronto, and yeah, the camera worked. It just wasn't crazy. I can't say it was bad, but I mean, the camera in general and gameplay, it's so Xbox 360 Connect era that it just feels out of place here. It doesn't feel like modern gaming. I think Nintendo's just a little bit too late to the party, the Mario Party. The Eric B says, I loved the Switch 1 and the OLED. This is a Switch with a 2 at the end of it. So yeah, I just love it. Me too. XGamerDaveX says, I hate no VRR when docked. So if you don't know what VRR is, that means variable refresh rate. Pretty much it prevents things like screen tearing and a bunch of technical stuff. Anyways, we have VRR on the actual undocked console, like the actual system itself with the built-in screen. But when you dock it, it seems that there's no VRR compatibility with displays for some reason. I don't know why. I personally don't think it's going to be that much of an issue, but I do understand why you would hate it. Especially the fact that Nintendo did say that it was compatible for like an hour or 2 and then it got taken down. So anyways, it's not that big of a deal to me, so I disagree. I do understand why you would hate it, but I don't think it's that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. Crustly1 says, I love how much more comfortable it would be for the player, considering it is larger and has far better Joy-Cons in terms of size and grip. Yes, trust me. That was one of the first things I noticed. The sheer size of this console. It is an absolute beast, and that just helps the comfort. It's just good. So I agree with this. This one's a little more techie. I don't know if I can actually answer this, but David Gordon 3744 hates. I really wish they found a way to use M2 drives instead of micro SD Express. We could have had way better read and write speeds for comparable or less money. The M2 has smaller drives, which could have been easy to install, but SD cards are much more kid-friendly, I guess. I think that micro SD cards are just better known. I don't even know what an M2 drive is, but I agree. If that's what you think should be done, then I agree with you. I'll stand with you on that one. Slice says, I like that it has better third-party support and is actually a somewhat powerful console because portable gaming usually doesn't include games like Call of Duty or Fortnite. I completely agree. I've been playing the Switch 1 for years. I've been doing videos on years about bad third-party games, and either a third-party game released with some heavy downgrades in terms of frame rate and resolution, or a third-party game just didn't release at all. So it's great to know that because of the enhanced power on the Switch 2, we'll see more games, including third-party games. We're gonna get so many third-party games I'm not even gonna know what to do with myself. off. So I agree with this one. Vandy Emmanuel 1 says, the camera accessory looks pretty bad. I can't believe Nintendo would go down that route for the Switch 2. Yeah, there's a lot to hate about the camera. I'm not gonna lie. I did a whole video on it explaining why this camera is going to flop. Yeah, it does look pretty bad. Although it's smaller than I thought, I will say. Minty Man H5R loves, one thing that is definitely being overlooked is the aesthetics and color scheme. I love the sleek jet black as it makes it look modern next to the Steam Deck, but the colored joystick rings give it a more recognizable Nintendo pop that they have always been unique for. Yeah, you know what? I was actually kind of shocked that they didn't do the classic full controller being red or full controller being blue. They just decided to go with the little hint of red and blue, or orange if you want to call it orange. I think it's red. It's like a pale red. But I agree. I absolutely like the more modern look, the more adult look, you could say. It doesn't look like a kid's toy anymore like the Switch 1 debatably looked like. So I agree. I love this. At first I wasn't sure, but it's definitely grown on me. Michael, look at that. A member. It's got a little sticker, and you can have one too if you become a member. Get exclusive content, behind the scenes footage, your name at the end of every single video, and you just get to support the channel. But he hates the non-free welcome tour and the camera. Need I say more? Welcome tour should have been free. It's practically a tech demo that people will need to pay for. So I'm probably going to 100% it. That's just me. Paper Bros 2508 says, I love the 1080p 120Hz screen. Me too. I could eat it. When I was playing Mario Kart in 1080p, I honestly could just tell that it was 1080p. Because it's not like a crazy big screen, that 1080p, it just looked really good. I just loved it. And playing anything in 120 Hz is fantastic. That's all I need to say. I love this. I completely agree with you, Paper Bros. I think another point of contention is that battery life. Often, battery life estimates are calculated under the best conditions. I feel like the system is going to last probably 3 hours at maximum charge, regardless of what you are doing. But we won't know until we get our hands on it. I'm also pretty concerned about the battery life. When you have something like the Steam Deck, for example, because of how powerful it is and how small it is, it's a handheld device, the battery didn't last long. It lasted me about an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So I definitely get why this would be a concern, especially after the Switch 1 battery life lasted so long. Obviously, this depends on the game you play, but I think it's gonna get like 2 to 8 hours of battery life. Again, we just don't quite know yet. It largely depends on what game you're playing, but I agree. I think this definitely is something that's not being talked about enough. Power Up Gamer 74 says, they love the sounds in the home menu when you press a button. Yes, we actually know that each icon gets its own little sound effect. Just listen. It's so Nintendo-y. We might not get menu music, but hey, I also love these sounds. Who needs white noise? RMT Gamer 6446 says, I'm worried about the kickstand because it looks more flimsy than the Switch OLED. Well, when I tested it out, that's exactly what I looked for. And yeah, it is more flimsy than the Switch OLED. But to be fair, the Switch OLED has like a stupidly beefy kickstand, like insanely. So while I understand why you'd be worried about the kickstand, I don't think that you should be worried about it unless you're grabbing it like the lunchbox and smashing it against the wall. Seyun says, I think the console is fine for what we get, but I don't know about $150 more than the Switch. But I can stomach that price. It's the $70 to $80 games that is gonna add up over time, unless you find it online somewhere cheaper. Nintendo never lowers their game prices, so good luck. Yeah, I think that really is the biggest thing to hate about this entire generation. Video games are just going up in price, and it all started with Mario Kart. Mario Kart was like the first AAA game that had the audacity to go to $80, and now other games are following suit. So it seems like $80 games are here to stay. Donkey Kong Bonanza is $70 still, but I mean, that's still a lot of money to pay. So I absolutely agree with this, and I hate it. Nintendo did say that the games are now going to follow this new variable pricing structure where depending on the game itself, that's how much it's going to cost to sell. So we'll see where that goes, but yeah, I don't like the $70 to $80 games. I agree with you here. Salty Toad hates Sega's games not having an upgrade path. I'm a huge Puyo Puyo Tetris 2 fan, and I hate that I have to pay full price for 2S instead of $10 to upgrade like most other Switch 2 editions. Yeah, this is just kind of weird. While generally, especially with first-party games, we see that if it's on Switch 1 and you have it for Switch 1, you can just pay $10, $15 to upgrade it to the Switch 2 edition of that game. Hogwarts Legacy, it's going to be like $10 to upgrade. Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild are also going to have $10 upgrade paths. And then you can play it in 4K, 60 frames per second, or whatever the Switch 2 edition gives you. But some games, like Sonic and Shadow Generations, for some reason, if you bought it on the Switch Switch 1, they're not actually giving you that upgrade path. You have to rebuy the entire full game brand new. And why do I want to? But yes, I absolutely agree. Every game, if they have a Switch 2 edition or a Switch 1 version of that game, they should be giving you upgrade paths for that game. I agree with this one. Miguel Crafter 2997 loves, the mouse one will definitely help bring more PC games to the Switch. I also love this, and we've already seen this happen. Cookie Clicker, remember that old web browser game? That's getting a Switch 2 version. I mean, it's also on other consoles, but still, it's a PC game. Just in general though, PC games can now come to the Nintendo Switch. It's cool. Monk M4B says, I don't like how there is a lack of colored Joy-Cons. Instead of being on the outside of the controller, the color is inside. It took me a little bit of time to actually get used to the fact that the color wasn't on the outside and that it was on the inside. I totally get this. I like it now, but I think just in general, what I am most confused about is why the Switch 2 doesn't have any different colored Joy-Cons to begin with. We're just getting that standard blue and red and black colored Joy-Cons that everyone else is getting. Everyone has that. At the launch of the Switch 1, we had the gray and we had the red and blue Joy-Con. And then over time, we got special edition Fortnite ones, we got green, purple, we got all sorts of stuff. So I'm surprised they didn't release more than one set, because if they did, that was more than one color, I would have definitely bought another set of Joy-Con, but now I don't need to, because I know that down the line I'm going to be able to get a lot more special fun colors. Also, can we just talk about the fact that the red and blue is on the inside of the Switch 2 itself? It's going to feel weird putting another color in there. Franciesco says they love the Amiibo functionality. Yay, me too! I pre-ordered them all. I have no money. Tamika Young says, I hate, but I would say the lack of themes and main menu music from what we know. I don't know if I actually hate the fact that there's no main menu music or themes. I don't love that we don't have them, but I don't know if I hate that we don't have them. It's something I'd like to see, but it's not something I'm like dying for. I mean, you're only on the main menu for so long. Because while I love the old Wii menu music and the Wii U menu music, over time, they can get a little tiring. Having nothing is fine. Obviously, I'd rather have them or have an option to have them than not have them, but I don't hate that they're not there. I'm just kind of indifferent to it. Formata667 says, hopefully I'm not being too optimistic, but I love that it seems to have a lot of things figured out to not have to warrant so many repairs, especially with the Joy-Cons, with which I've had repaired for latch, sticks, SL/SR cable, and the rail. That is a lot of repairs. I don't know what you're doing to your Switch. I've had to never send my Switch out for repairs, especially not like this, but yes, it seems that the Switch 2, just by feeling it alone, feels a lot more beefy. I don't think this is gonna break as easy, especially now with the magnets. Joe Water 1738 says, the screen share frame rate is abysmal. They just shouldn't have done that and focused elsewhere. Game chat, good though. So if you didn't know, there's this new game chat functionality on the Switch 2. You can now chat with people like it's a phone call, but you can also share your screen. And when you share your screen, the console looks like it's running at like 12 frames per second. Obviously, this doesn't look very pretty, but I think the whole game chat function is just kind of weird in the first place. But like I say, I'd rather have it than not have it. And if the frame rate needs to go low, then the frame rate needs to go low. I don't know why it has to though. I mean, Discord can do this very well, so I agree with you. I agree with you here. Ricket Notch 2 says, I'm looking forward to better hardware. I get that Nintendo doesn't prioritize hardware on their consoles, but at this point, it's limiting their ability to play games that aren't made with the console in mind, and it's a bit annoying. Like I mentioned before with third parties, we're going to see a lot more third parties on this console, and they're actually going to be playable. They're not going to need to be cut down to 30 frames per second at 680p or 720p. It won't have to have those major downgrades. Like, this is going to be good enough to play most of our third party games at a decent quality. And also, if games are made with this console in mind, they're going to just look fantastic. Nintendo games just look so good. So I agree with you here. Connor Second says, I hate this stupid camera. It's $55 and was worse quality than my $40 drone camera. Exactly. Although, like I've said, this is very small. I'm also buying the Piranha Plant camera. It's 480p. Why am I doing this? Monk M4B says, I love how it is powerful whilst being compact. Don't we all? NAJ says, they need to get rid of variable pricing. If they want to charge $80 US for a game, they need to do it with their big release games across the board and drop this, we worked hard and spent lots of money on this one, so it costs more. Now any big game releasing under $80 is going to feel inferior in some way. This is not actually something I thought about, because now that Nintendo is releasing games at $80, it makes even a $70 game feel less worth it. So they're actually saying that they would prefer to have all games be $80 instead of just one or two. I mean, I hate that they're making them $80 in the first place. I think $70 should have been the cap, and that's kind of like the basic, price that game should be. And they kind of just went above and beyond with $80. I don't know why they did that. Very interesting. I neither agree or disagree, because I don't like that it's $80, but I see what you're saying with $70 games. Equan1259 says, the larger SL and SR buttons are so incredibly awesome for before using a Joy-Con on its side. I agree. It's insane. When I played Street Fighter 6 at the Nintendo Switch 2 event, I couldn't believe how good these controllers actually feel on its side. Like clicking the SL and SR buttons actually feel like buttons. If you look at the classic Joy-Con, like these are hard to press. You have to like push them down in a weird way. No, these just feel like they just feel like actual buttons. And it doesn't feel uncomfortable. Like they're actually serviceable controllers. So I agree with this one. J Geodes has a few things that they hate, but we've already talked about a few, so let me pick out the ones that I haven't talked about yet. No light option at launch. So if you don't know what they mean by light option, they mean like the Nintendo Switch Lite. Now you see, even with the Switch 1, the Lite didn't come out at launch. It came out like 2 years after the original Switch came out. While it would be nice for people who want to eventually get a Lite, and is going to be good for people who want to save a bit of money and don't want to dock the system, I don't hate that they don't have a Lite at launch. The next one says, the Joy-Cons and Pro controllers should have analog triggers, especially since they're adding GameCube to Nintendo Classics at launch. So if you don't know what analog triggers are, it's when you slowly can click down on the trigger and it slowly accelerates a car or something like that. The Switch 1 and the Switch 2 have these digital triggers. You just click the button and that's it. And they specifically mentioned GameCube games because, well, the GameCube had analog triggers on them. I am surprised that they didn't add analog triggers, but I don't know if I hate that they didn't. I'm kind of just indifferent to it. If they're not going to use it, then they're not going to use it. It's not that big of a deal, in my opinion. Dylan Knock 08 says, I love upgrades to previous games. Me too! Not even including Nintendo Switch 2 Edition games, most games that get played on the Switch 2 will just run better because it's on better hardware. Load times might be faster, resolution might be upscaled, frame rates will be capped at a specific frame rate. That's just how it's going to be. So just in general, I agree. I love that games will just get upgrades. Cash Agent 8 says, no pizzazz in the UI and no confirmation of Mii's. So no pizzazz on the UI. I kind of see what you're saying. The UI for the Switch 2 and the Switch 1 are very similar. The only difference with the Switch 2 is that it has like this new rainbow outline when you're on a selection, and also the corners of all of the assets on the UI are actually like rounded. As for the Mii's, there are going to be Mii's the same way as the Switch 1. They're just going to be hidden in the settings. They're not going to be nearly as prominent as on the Wii or the 3DS, but hey, we'll still have them. Tomodachi Life is coming out, so maybe they'll bring back Mii's in a more upfront way when Tomodachi Life comes out, especially if that game does really well, which it seems like it's going to be because there's a lot of hype on that game online. So I don't really agree with this one. I like that they're keeping the UI simple and the Mii's are the exact same. So moving on. Jonathan Cross says, they love the fact it will outperform my Steam Deck. Yeah, this is great. Finally, we have something comparable to the Steam Deck. The Switch 1 was awful compared to the Steam Deck. I even tested 50 games on the Steam Deck versus the Nintendo Switch. The Steam Deck won almost every single turn. And also the whole comparison with mouse mode on Steam Deck games versus the Switch 2, it'll be crazy to compare the two. You better believe I'm going to at some point. Redman says, they hate the fact the screen isn't OLED and also the price. Now, I've talked about the price before in previous videos. I don't mind the price of the actual console itself. I think it's pretty fair actually, especially in comparison to the other current gen options. It's not horrible for what you're getting. Games is another thing. Now, the fact that the screen is an OLED. Coming from an OLED screen, I totally see that concern. OLED screens are absolutely beautiful. But when I played the Switch 2 at the Nintendo Switch 2 experience, I had quite a bit of time looking at this new LCD display. And this display looks fantastic. It's actually a lot brighter than the OLED screen, and it supports HDR, which means that it can get brighter, and the colors are still pretty contrasty. Not as much as the OLED, because it can't be, but it still looks very good for a screen. So I think regardless of if you're coming from an OG Switch or a Switch OLED, you're still getting an upgrade here. Ray B's Edits says, defo the bigger screens and thinner bezels. I don't actually know if the bezels are thinner, but yes, the bigger screen. I love that, especially just the bigness of the entire Switch 2. It's gonna be epic. But you know what else I love? New merch. Go check it out, russvandy.com. RDB the tech guy says, I love the ability to use Joy-Cons as the mouse and the new 120 frames per second HDR screen. I'm surprised nobody talked about just the fact that the mouse is cool. I completely agree. I love this mouse. It's so unique, and as a console gamer, especially if you're playing like a shooter like Fortnite, it's gonna make the controls much more accurate and precise. So I'm excited to break that out. And yes, the screen is absolutely dope. Rats Commander says, I love how the controls are now magnetic. Yes, the magnets are great. The other day I was trying to slide my Joy-Con out of a rail, but it was in like my TV stand and it just didn't fit properly. Trying to get it out was just cramped. But now being able to just remove them from the side is going to be a game changer. Just in general, having magnets is going to be very good, especially with possible accessories. For example, the Joy-Con wheel, the official Nintendo Joy-Con wheel, you don't even just pry that into place. It just sticks into magnets. It's just going to make everything a lot easier to connect everything to when it comes to the Joy-Con. So I'm excited. I love that they're magnetic. Slain Red 4339 says, definitely the power of the system. Nintendo games running at 4K 60 frames per second is a dream come true. I agree. They look fantastic. Themfish75 says, they hate the ability to remotely deactivate your your console whenever they feel like it. This is something I've been seeing a lot on the internet lately. People have been saying that Nintendos can just deactivate your Switch 2 whenever they want. Well, yes, that technically is true, but it's only when you're directly breaking the law, like pirating, emulating, modding. I really don't think that they're going to do it, and I think it's mainly just a bluff. Like, I highly doubt Nintendo will actually brick anybody's system and just make it unusable after they've paid for it. Now, removing access to online play, which we've already seen with the Switch 1, that makes a lot of sense to me. Completely deactivating the console, I actually don't know if they're going to do that, and maybe they're just saying that to scare you, but yeah, we'll see. Louise the Unknown says, I love that it releases on my birthday. Happy birthday! And NJ says, Welcome Tour needs to be free. I'll buy it. Let me know something you love and hate about the Nintendo Switch 2. I'm so excited. More Switch 2 content coming soon. Also, hey, check out my new merch and like and subscribe if you're not already. All right, I'll see you in the next one. See you later.